evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wall of Power. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. The Twin Cities is a guitar player and lover's nirvana. Our guest tonight, Steve Kaul, and has really come into his own over the last couple of decades as a guitarist, bandleader, songwriter, and all-around good guy. Like me, he rambled down to the Twin Cities from northern Minnesota. His hometown is Bemidji, home of Babe and the Blue Ox, and my mother's hometown as well. We are going to have Mr. Kaul on the show all night tonight, hear his story, listen to some of his music, watch a video of him in action playing at the studio he owns in Northeast Minneapolis, Wild Sound Recording Studio, and all in all, just see what is on Steven's mind. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and bandleader of the Brass Kings and Bemidji native, Mr. Steve Kaul.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for coming down. I know you work right up the street where we taped this show at the Minnesota Cable Channel 6. You're 8 blocks away at Wild Sound, which is online at wild-sound.com. What were you working on today?
I was working on a singer-songwriter. You may know Matt Fox.
Yeah, I know Matt.
He's doing a new record, and it's just about finished. So we're finishing up the final mixes, getting ready to master. It's sounding good. It's a different project. It's a band project for him. So it's taking a songwriter and then filling it in.
Right. Did you put the band together, or his guy?
You know, it was a combination. Yeah, he found one of the guys, I found another guy, and we fit some things in, and brought in a fiddle player to add some tracks, and brought in Scotty Miller to do some clav and Wurlitzer.
One of the best keyboard men in the country.
It was a tremendous project, and it sounds really nice now.
We're going to talk with Steve about all aspects of his career. We're going to have more about Wild Sound, one of the finest studios in town, kind of the first choice of anybody that wants to do an acoustic project. But I know you also do bands, and you also do audiobooks.
Right, yeah.
We're going to talk about that and how you got into it. But let's talk about the young Steve Kaul up there on the shores of Lake Bemidji.
That's right. If I can remember that far back. That's where I started out. You know, it was a small town, about 12,000 people. And as you know, you're living up north there, and you have a different kind of access to the world. You're kind of seeing everything through the pine trees.
Right. That's a good way of putting it.
But there's some great people up there, and very fortunate, as I know you were in your hometown, to find these people who had dedicated their lives to music, such as Jim Miller, who was an early influence, and in fact, his band, known only locally, had a washtub bass in it when they first started. It was one of the first bands I saw live, and I was sitting cross-legged as a kid on the floor. Now I have a band with a washtub bass, so it kind of all comes around.
Continues the tradition.
Yes, it does, but you know, that was the roots music injection there.
Well, I had played a couple of shows with Jim up at the Deer Lake Boogie. I don't know if you ever heard about that.
Oh, yeah.
Legendary 3-day throwdown in the woods outside of Effie, Minnesota, where I got to know Jim. Of course, his reputation preceded him. He was just one of those local heroes. Didn't necessarily play like all over except the Bemidji area as far as I knew. But even though, you know, I was a couple hours away, a couple hours east in Virginia, Minnesota, we heard about Jim Miller. And then when I finally got a chance to hear him, I go, oh, this is it. I get it. I get it now.
Yeah, he was that kind of guy. He had that gravelly voice, that real low, believable voice. I mean, you trusted what he was saying.
Right.
But he was a writer's writer, too. I mean, he was a poet.
And a really good guitar player.
Yeah, fantastic. Individual songwriter, too. I mean, he didn't cut any corners on his politics either.
Right.
He laid it all out there.
Right.
But he did tour when he was younger, you know, back in the 70s, and he made it to the coast, you know, and he was, I think, you know, he came down to the cities for a while and tried to make a go of it and just was not thrilled with city life. I think he was one of the kind of guys that needed a smaller town to have a life in.
Yeah.
And so he made his music there, and it's a choice, you know, that artists make, you know, and so he stuck to it. But he was treasured there.
Yeah. And so who else up there besides Mr. Miller?
Well, Mr. Miller and his whole family and the band kind of wound up working at the only real studio in town, which was Gary Berger's studio. It was audio camera. He did some visual and everything.
And Gary Berger was in this band, the Monks, that I don't know enough about, but tell us about the Monks.
The Monks were kind of a pre-punk band.
Right.
They
with kind of almost a Devo edge, weren't they?
They were
kind of a visionary.
They were.
I mean, they had a vision.
In the '60s, they formed in Germany, in Hamburg, and so they were courted by these German promoters who convinced them not only to call themselves the Monks, but also to have a tonsured haircut.
Right.
So they've got like the little circle of hair up there, and wearing the monk robes, you know, at various appearances. But they were cutting edge, kind of like Thugs, you know, kind of like cutting edge punk, you know, interesting
in the
stuff.
'60s.
They ended up doing shows with the Kinks.
Wow.
They ended up meeting Hendrix.
Wow.
I mean, they were in that same circle. So,
were all the rest of the guys from Bemidji, or did Gary meet guys around the country?
he met them from all over.
Right. Okay.
So they were from various spots.
And what did Gary play?
Gary played guitar.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of the guitarists, and he discovered feedback
Really?
at one point. You know, whether he was the first to,
Right.
You know,
There's
there are
probably
a
a
lot of claims
handful
to
of them
that.
around, yeah,
But back then, that was a new sound.
especially in Bemidji.
Oh man, yeah. But the funny thing is, as big as that band got, and then later he moved back to Bemidji and so on after the service and whatnot, he never said a word about his exploits and who he had met and what he had done. The fact that he had toured in Europe and all this. They were a lot bigger over there than they were here. But we had to pry those stories out of him, you know?
Yeah.
He wouldn't just sit and tell them. You'd hear through the grapevine that, oh yeah, he met the Rolling Stones and this and that. And you'd go and ask him, and yeah, that happened. You know, he grudgingly, like any northern Minnesota kid would, okay, all right, you got me.
Right.
You know?
Now, Gary passed just a while ago.
Yeah, he did.
A year or two, right?
Yeah.
Now, didn't they, did they do a First Avenue show or something?
They did several things. They had a huge documentary that came out. And so they actually did some shows in New York and in London, and I think they did a couple other European shows. So they kind of had a resurgence, and they were able to get back together, most of them, and do some performances too.
It's beautiful that you can be recognized way after the fact and enjoy some of that acclaim while you're still walking the earth.
It really was something. I was real happy for him.
So, did you just start playing guitar on your own, or did you take lessons, or how did that start?
You know, I took a summers full of lessons at the Melody Shop in Bemidji. I was learning. Here's the thing, though. You know, I was being taught Old MacDonald and the standard melodies and picking them out on my guitar. But I'd go home at night and listen to the Doobie Brothers and try to jam along with the records.
Right.
Old MacDonald could not keep up.
Right.
So I taught
Long
myself
train
by
runner.
ear. You know, yeah, exactly. So I trained myself by ear for guitar. I started writing and playing. At the same time, I started playing violin in the orchestra. So I was learning classical music. I was learning how to sight read.
And you said when you and I were chatting about a month ago, you said there was a really good band director up there.
Yeah. Swanson was the band director at the university there in Bemidji, and then Paul Brandvik was the choir director, and he's internationally known. So, again, people that chose to live in this small town, but really added to the community.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people to learn from there.
Well, what a bucolic place to grow up. You had the beautiful lake, busy in the summertime. You had a lot of tourists.
Right.
A lot of people, and then not too far from the Itasca State Park, the beginning of the mighty Mississippi River.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really, really a beautiful area. I mean, people go there to vacation, like you said. So
are your mom and dad still up there?
They are still up there.
Okay.
Yeah, Dad is a painter. He's still painting like crazy. And
House
both of them
painting
are,
or art painting?
No, he's a painter,
Cool.
fine art painter.
So that's where you got your artistic feel and
I
chops.
think so. I gave painting a shot, but I could not keep up with my dad. He's the visual guy. I just stuck to music.
We've got Steve Kaul, great musician, good friend of mine. We're going to end the first set here on this episode with a solo tune by Steve. Tell us really quickly the name of the song and when it was recorded.
Highway 64.
Tell us about.
There you go. That's the highway that I took down from Bemidji to Minneapolis the first time.
Say no more. Steve Kaul, Highway 64. We'll be with Steve Kaul all night tonight on the Wall of Power Radio and TV Hour.
He took Highway 64 down to town, lay there in his room with the streets all around, and listened to that city sound. Everything inside him removed, all locked up in a rented room. Listen to the car go boom, boom, boom.
What can you do with so much space? The Solar Arts Building in Northeast Minneapolis. A masterpiece of exposed brick, wooden beams, hardwood floors, and natural light, this unique multi-use space is perfect for a variety of events. To literally top it off, there are over 100 solar panels on the roof, making the Solar Arts Building self-sustainable. You've got the need, we've got the space. The Solar Arts Building, 711 Northeast 15th Avenue in beautiful Northeast Minneapolis. Give them a call at 763-234-5069 or send a message to mike@solarartsbuilding.com.
Welcome back to the Wall of Power Radio and TV Hour. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. My guest all night tonight is my good friend, great guitar player, band leader, songwriter, and studio owner, and good guy, Steve Kaul. Steve, at the end of the first set, you were talking about coming down to Minneapolis on Highway 64, which was the song we listened to. What made you decide to come down to the big city?
Good question. You know, I had grown up in Bemidji, then I went on to college over in Grand Forks. I got a degree in English there and was planning on going on to grad school. You know, writing has always been my thing. But I got hooked up with some musicians. You know, I'd been playing in coffee shops through college, recording on 4-tracks and doing all this.
TF 4-tracks.
Yeah, you got it. And so this band got going and had a great singer from up in Bemidji area, and we were all just about at that age when we had to make some decisions.
Right.
And we unanimously voted to move down to the cities and
be a band,
and rent a house and be a band.
Yeah, I love it.
And make our fame and fortune, and that's the big dream, right? That's what we all do. We hop in a car and thinking that if we just go to a different location, everything will be changed and lifted up. Only you're still the same.
Yeah, right.
As you know. But the way to get there was Highway 64.
What was the name of the band?
Big Water.
Big Water, okay.
Yeah,
coming down on Highway 64.
That's right, that's right. And
what kind of stuff were you playing then?
You know, we were writing our own songs, had a little bit of a rock thing, a little not progressive, but kind of a country rock thing. It was before alt country happened.
Right.
The singer was just incredibly good. He sounded like Joe Cocker, amazing bluesy singer, could sing straight country too if you wanted to.
I imagine you guys did a little Waylon Jennings there.
You know, we didn't do a lot of covers.
Really?
You know, he had been doing that for years, and he really wanted to do original stuff. And he was a good writer too, and guitar player. So we riffed on some things. We wrote some new songs and played some shows. I think our first one was at Fernando's.
Oh yeah, Lake Street in Bloomington, baby.
Yeah. So we did.
When I moved down to the big city in 1977, my band was going to come down, the Cats Under the Stars. I said, hey, I found this great 3-room house on 24th and Bloomington, which was fine until the first warm day of spring hit. And the neighborhood became the neighborhood
Right.
that justified the only $300 a month for a 3-bedroom house. But it had its charm. But so you guys were playing Fernando. Let me ask you one question though. When you said country rock and Bemidji, let's talk about Padipto and Dan Lund.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Did you get a chance to hear those guys? Because those guys were like right on kind of the cutting edge of that whole country rock scene, coming from Bemidji. I mean,
Right.
it was
Right.
you know, you had the Flying Burrito Brothers and that whole scene. But these guys were in Bemidji. Tell us about that, Dan Lund.
Padipto was probably the best known band that came out of Bemidji, at least at that time. Dan was always well regarded as a guitar player. Just every time his name was mentioned, it was like, you know, angels would sing and there'd be a little glow, I swear. And
Master of the Telecaster.
amazing with the B-bender and all that. And one of his bandmates, John Collins, was an amazing songwriter and fingerpicker. And we actually got to, John was on our first recording, a Big Water recording that we did with Gary Berger. And that was a real treat. He came in and worked on some songs. And we kind of got, you know, one of the Padipto guys was in kind of helping us with our music, right? And
Uncle Dan.
it was incredible. So we moved down, when we moved down to the cities. Later on, I had a chance to reconnect with Dan and had him come over and play some tracks. But those guys were just, were something else. I think, you know, they had cautionary tales about the music business as well, because it's not always what you think it's going to be.
Right.
And in fact, you know, they could tell you stories about how their recording sessions went and who played what instruments and how it all went down. But
well, you got to find this out now firsthand. Rock and roll stars at Fernando's on Bloomington Lake. So tell us about that first gig.
Oh man, you know, you're in the big city and you're all nervous.
And what year was that?
Oh boy, that was probably 88, somewhere in there.
The scene was rocking back
You
then.
know? Now, we got there for our first gig, and this is kind of a humorous story. We got there, and the place is kind of full, and we thought, wow, there's a lot of people here for us. You know, we've never played here before, and pretty soon it's like, yeah, there's more people waiting at the door. What's going on here? So we get ready to go on, and I hear one of the customers saying, well, who are these guys? We're waiting for Big Walter. They were waiting for Big Walter. He was a mainstay of Fernando's.
Big Walter Smith of the Groove Merchants.
Exactly. That's who they were there. It cleared out. We played to crickets and 2 bouncers.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, we were pretty excited though for a while. So
that brief 15 minutes of fame was right there.
it felt pretty good.
Oh.
We thought we had made it already.
That's
we hadn't
funny.
even played a chord.
So how long did the Big Water stay together, and where else were you playing?
You know, we played around. We mostly tried to record and get our stuff together. We didn't have a demo to go out and shop.
Right.
And by the time we got to the cities, we had 0 money.
Right.
So, you know, you try and scrounge it together and recording on the 4-track and making it work. But we were together for a while. We did a lot of fine work. You know, as most bands do, we imploded.
Sure.
And exploded at some point.
Right.
And all went our separate ways. But we're still connected. In fact, the drummer, Tommy, lives in International Falls, and he brought his daughter down, and I recorded her song.
Oh, how sweet is
at
that?
the studio, so that was really something.
So are we looking for a Big Water reunion here at some point?
I don't know.
You got to do one night somewhere.
Mitch is in Nashville. He's charting with his gospel trio, you know, so I don't know. If he would be up for coming up, I think we could make something happen.
I'm going to make some calls. I'm going to have my people call your people.
Things are going to happen now.
Give me 10 seconds about what we're going to listen to now.
All right.
Is this the Brass Kings?
This should be, I think, is it Mule Skinner Blues?
Mule Skinner Blues, and who's it by? Who recorded this?
Well, originally, there was a band called Mule Skinner.
Right.
Now, the original Mule Skinner Blues is, I'm going to forget his name now because I'm thinking about a bunch of different things.
We'll talk about it on the other side of the break.
Yeah.
Mule Skinner Blues by the Brass Kings.
Jimmy Rogers.
Jimmy Rogers, right.
Yeah, anyway, but Jim Miller gave me an album, Mule Skinner, which is progressive bluegrass, and it was about 900 miles an hour. This version was, so that's how we did it on our debut CD.
That's what we're listening to. More with Steve Kaul on the Wall of Power Radio and TVR. after these messages.
Well, it's good morning, Captain. Good morning, shine. Do you need a new mule skinner on the new line?
I want you to meet Two Gingers Irish Whiskey. I'm Kieran and I'm Irish, so I tend to like a challenge. Why not? I wanted a whiskey to help find me out what's out there. Like what's really out there. And I found the oldest distillery in Ireland with a water wheel and awards for its small family of whiskies in the middle of Ireland. As I've always seen it, you can't win the lottery unless you buy a ticket. So try it. The investment is small and the flavor is big. Now, it's perfect for drinking neat. Its character holds up, like the Irish, when the bastards try to get you down. Two Gingers Irish Whiskey. Distilled twice for more character, time for more flavor, and less of the old burn. No lite bastardes carborundum. Don't let the bastards get you down.
Welcome back to the Wall of Power Radio and TV Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa. My guest all night tonight, a great guitar player, musician, cool cat, and a buddy of mine, Steve Kaul. We just listened to a little bit of Mule Skinner Blues to go out of the second set of the Wall of Power Radio Hour. And we ended up talking about Steve's band, Big Water, had made their big debut to 3 people at Fernando's on Lake in Bloomington. The band broke up, then what was next?
A lot of things were next, but I'll talk about the musical ones. You know, you bounce from apartment to apartment trying to scrape it together and, you know, keep on doing music. I always had my acoustic guitar with me, and even though I played electric mostly with this, with the band, I always wrote on my acoustic, and I was doing some finger picking and this and that. So, you know, it wasn't long before I was putting something together that was more acoustic based. And I made a few forays into jazz and hung out with some cats, you know, and had some fun.
Did you swing with the cats?
I guess you could call it that. I swung as hard as I could, you know, being a neophyte, but I learned a lot from playing with some keyboard players and some horn players, and you know, we did all right. You know, each band that I was in ended up on main stage at First Ave for something or other, which was a huge thing for us.
Oh my God, it still is.
And it was just tremendous. Yeah. So, you know, we did the whole thing. Each band, one of them was kind of it had a B3 organ and a Rhodes. My good buddy John, who was originally in Big Water too, he was playing the Rhodes and writing a lot of the material. Had a sax player and a great jazz drummer.
The name of that band was?
Corn Elder was the name.
Let's keep moving on.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
My dad's middle name is Elder, so it's a little personal.
It was I don't know. It was something one of the guys saw in Amsterdam and thought it was cool.
Right.
And you know how that goes.
Yeah. Well, it was Amsterdam.
It was Amsterdam all the way, and but it was a great band. It had a cool vibe to it. We ended up, you know, playing at the Caboose and whatnot in First Ave. You know, that band exploded. The next one was a hard rock rap band called Ghost Dance Deluxe, which
so now what year is this?
This is like 91.
The rap, heavy metal marriage, that was new at that time.
It was, and it had a little punk influence as well. That band was incredible. It had a ton of energy. You know, we wound up opening.
Name?
Well, the name had an issue. And I shouldn't have even probably said it because...
it was Ghost Dance Deluxe.
Right. That name is the name of a Native American religion.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so...
although there was another band from southern Minnesota in the early 80s called Ghost Dance, so...
Yeah. Well, but, you know, the band received a letter from Pine Ridge Indian Reservation asking us not to use the name.
Cease and desist.
And so some of us said, yeah, we're not going to use it. And the other guy said, you're out of the band. So
Right.
that's how that one blew
Right.
up. But, I mean, we got to open for the Bad Brains and did
Wow.
all kinds of crazy shows and
They were
toured
a
a little
great
bit.
band.
It was a lot of fun. But
Isn't that First Avenue? Because, you know, God, I don't know how many dozens of shows I've seen there. Patti Smith, Iggy Pop, boy, you name it. And I've had the pleasure of opening up for Richard Thompson and Bruce Coleman.
man.
Tell the people out there, the kids that want to play First Avenue, how cool it is to play First Avenue.
well, you know, back in the day, you know, you'd be greeted by Conrad
Right.
with his full mane
Yeah.
of dreads. And Conrad was as easily as well known among the bands that toured around the country as the club was.
Yeah.
They were synonymous.
Yeah.
So you'd meet him and he'd show you around. You'd
And a Northeast Minneapolis native, we might add.
Yeah, indeed he is, and a music lover
And
to the core.
You'd never know when he had those dreads down to his belt. An incredible golfer.
Huge baseball fan. I
Yeah.
mean, the guy.
He's a true
We
American.
talk about the Twins more than anything
Yeah.
else, and then he'd say, "Oh yeah, okay, and here's your set."
Yeah.
You know, so it was a
Well, the thing
pleasure.
about First Avenue, other than the magic of that stage, and it's the greatest rock club in the world, period, you know. It's the reason why Prince called it his club, was the staff, from Conrad to the sound guys, to the bartenders, to the people sweeping up everything. They always treated the musicians like kings and queens.
Yeah, fantastic. Never had a bad time there.
Yeah.
It always sounded great.
Yeah.
And there was just this exhilaration because, as you know, if you know, you go through your sound check and everything, and like any other show, it's like, wow, you know, oh, everything's sounding good, but you know, it's First Avenue too. You know?
Right.
Then when you come out, you know, the crowd's out there, you can feel the electricity, and you're behind a curtain, and as you know, you're standing there getting ready to play, and the curtain slowly rises,
yeah.
and the people go crazy,
It's
right?
like Broadway.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's an amazing feeling. So, an honor too.
Who did you start to listen, let's say, in the West Bank scene?
Oh man, I mean, there's so much that was going on. You know, when I first moved down, boy, you know, you gotta think about, you know, the people who were playing the 400 bar.
Right.
You know, you were down there a lot. Willie Murphy was down there. You could see Spider
Jayhawks.
Yeah, I mean,
Bill Hinckley and Judy Larson.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, just think about that. You know, and that's just, you know, there's so many different genres that
Right.
can be represented here. But we'll talk about the area. You know, the 400 and the Viking were pretty special places, and oftentimes people would go back and forth in the single night, you
Yeah.
know, and to go see who's over here, who's over there.